6:30 on Tuesday, March 27th, 2018. I will call this meeting of the Webster School Committee to order and ask that we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance, flag, republic. First item on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to approve our meeting minutes for March 15, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Laurie, would you pull the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. McKenna, do you think Mr. Fatman will be joining us? Okay, perfect. I was going to move you guys up, but I'll wait, obviously. Okay. Continuing with the agenda, the superintendent's report. Good evening, Mrs. Gogan. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you for asking. It is a busy time of the year, and it was a busy day. I have an assortment of announcements to share with you. I do want you to know that I was at the board meeting today for the Central Mass Collaborative and procured a 0% increase for Webster for next year, even though the rates did go up 8% for non-members, and 15% for one program and 24% for another program. I am pleased to let you know that the administrative team has completed their DSAC learning walkthrough at Park Avenue Elementary School. That was rescheduled 3 times due to snow. We had a wonderful learning walkthrough experience going through the elementary school, and these learning walkthroughs have been very helpful for the administrative team to calibrate their understanding of what we're looking for in student engagement and looking at some of our instructional practices. So that's been very helpful. And I am pleased to let you know that Park Avenue Elementary School and Ellen Nyland, due to their hard work, have been recognized by the Worcester County Food Bank, and they will be coming on April 27th, I believe. Senator Fatman will also be joining them. I'm not sure if you will be joining them as well.
I have visited with them at Park Ave in the past, and certainly love to join again if the schedule allows.
Great.
Excuse me 1 minute, Mrs. Gogan, because I get caught. Can you please turn see the button? Thank you very much. Perfect.
The Park Ave Elementary School Breakfast in the Classroom has been recognized, and the EOS Foundation just notified us that Park Ave Elementary School will be receiving the Healthy Start Award. Ellen Nyland and Ginger Coleman and myself will be going to the State House on May 10th to receive that award. Happy birthday. Let's see what else I can tell you. I would like to follow up with the school choice survey results. As you know, we are concerned at the number of students that are leaving the district, and we sent out a letter to 130 parents, and we have received at this point 23 responses. So you have a graph in front of you that I will briefly explain. As you can see from the graph, we do lose students mostly in kindergarten and in 9th grade. We did ask parents why they were leaving, and as you can see from the results, a majority of them, or 9 of them, have never attended the school. We asked them what they thought about our academic performance. 3 said excellent, 2 said above average, 6 said average, 1 said below, and 2 said poor, and 9 never attended. We asked for reasons why people were leaving, and I think that's hard for people who have never attended to really answer that question, but this sort of gives us an idea of the range of reasons. As you can see, there's a broad range, but the 2 that stand out are school climate and academic reasons. And I think that, as you can tell, we are working on school climate and academics and will continue to do so. So I wanted to share that with you. I also wanted to share with you that we will be partnering with the Webster Town Library, and we're looking for students to be part of the time capsule that they are putting together for the library. I thought it would be a great way to share student voices. If students wrote about what it's like to be a student in the Webster Public Schools in the year 2018. So I know some of the teachers are using this as a writing prompt in their classrooms, and what we will do is put together a book that we will donate to the library for their timeshare, and hopefully keep a copy here, maybe in our central office, for visitors to read while they're sitting and waiting for somebody out in our lobby. We've been busy talking a lot about academics, but we're also looking at our processes and procedures in the district, and one of our goals is to have more consistent processes and procedures across the schools. So we started looking at our registration packet, and I'm pleased to say that the administrators took a look at the packets, and then Stacy Quilty and Michelle Budney worked diligently with coming up with a concise packet, and the new packet's pretty thorough. It includes information about immunizations, what documentation people need to provide us to show that they live in Webster, and another important piece is that there is the home language survey, which is the home language survey from the Department of Education, which is crucial in determining who will be screened for an ELL student, and that is part of our packet. And we also included provisions for translations, so all of this material can be translated. We held a district-wide meeting with all of the administrative assistants and anyone that has anything to do with registrations, whether that's registering or withdrawing students, to go over implementing these new packets. So I'm pleased that we're on our way to look at some of our internal processes. I would also like to make you aware that I was also at the Southern Worcester County Educational Collaborative Board meeting, and we voted on, as you know, the 5% increase for next year, and they have approved their FY19 tiered tuition pilot for member districts, which we are, for students that are going to the Grow School and the Rise Academy. And the rates are there, so we hope to maximize this tiered tuition pilot. As you can see, we currently have 15 students, and the tuition pilot program is a volume discount over 2% over 10 students going there. So that, and then for personnel, I'm sorry to report that Mr. Knowlton has submitted his resignation for June 30th, 2018. I want to publicly take this opportunity to thank Mr. Knowlton for his years of dedicated service in the Bartlett High School and bringing that school to a safe climate. The climate in that school is wonderful. Kids feel safe, and we will certainly miss you, and we wish you the best. I would like to inform the school committee that the position has been posted. I am in the process of forming a committee, and I will chair that committee and run that search and keep you updated. I would also like to let you know that we have hired Lester Boggio as the first grade teacher at Park Ave Elementary. He will be starting on April 9th. He is replacing Susan Lewis, who is moving from grade 1 to an ELL position. She's a certified ELL teacher. That will be effective April 9th as well. And Gil Parmley has been hired as the new custodian that will be shared between Park Ave and Webster Middle School, and he will start on April 2nd. And that concludes my report tonight.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the committee from Mr. Hogan? Let me just first reiterate on behalf of the entire school committee, Mr. Knowlton, and thank you not only for your 6 years here in Webster, but close to 20 years or more as a principal and administrator in public education. Okay, I didn't want to give away your age, but but seriously, I know, to Mrs. Gogan's point, as a parent who had a lot of concerns regarding Bartlett when you first came into the district, I want to thank you and your team. I know every leader says it's not just one individual, but when you came in, I saw quickly, very quickly, a vast improvement, and that improvement has been maintained. And I think obviously throughout the entire district, but especially at Bartlett, the wonderful evidence are students like Louise, who I've seen for many, many years, who have graduated. I think you heard me at the last meeting talk about, I've known hundreds of graduates, and they've done very well. Most of them continuing in college, others going more the job route. But again, thank you for your years of service, and hopefully, to a certain extent, don't be a stranger to the Bartlett Indians. Actually, can you just grab that microphone and turn it on and speak into it, please? Thank you.
I guess I would just follow up with what you said, that, certainly I was the principal of the school, but I was surrounded by good people. Good leaders surround themselves with good people, and in my opinion, the 6 years that I worked with the faculty and staff at Bartlett High School, I was very fortunate to have them. What we accomplished there, and with the wonderful kids that we have, it was totally a community effort, and I thank all of them for their support and their hard work too. So,
Thank you. And just going back, Mrs. Gogan, to your school choice presentation, some of my questions you may not know. I'm wondering, out of the 6 students who chose out at grade 9, do we have any idea if they even attended our school district? Because I'm guessing a lot of kids, we obviously have, well, we had 3, now we have 2 K through 8 parochial programs in town. And I'm wondering how many of those students never even gave us a chance, meaning, I know your other chart says that 9 total never attended.
Right.
Obviously, 5 of those 9 are from kindergarten, I'm guessing. So I was just curious if you know, out of the 6 that chose 9th grade, how many actually never were in our school district?
If you look at the first page, the never attended is 4.
Right.
So the 6 9th graders did attend and left. The never attended on the first page is 4, and the never attended on the second page is 9.
Oh, I see.
So the kindergarten students is 5.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
then,
So the 6 of the students that chose to leave starting in 9th grade were at the
Students,
Webster Middle School?
from the people who responded to us. So like I said, 130 letters were sent out with self-addressed stamped envelopes so that we could get the information back, and we've only received 23 back. But I think it's good information. And people, the fact that people responded, I think, was wonderful.
And again, I know a lot of information was discussed at our last meeting regarding school climate and academic reasons, and I know a lot of effort is going in to improve those, but I don't think it's real surprising that those are the 2 leading categories. Unfortunately, and we've talked about this numerous times, many of the people that are concerned about school climate and/or academic reasons may not have accurate information.
I would say to anyone watching, and I think the Bartlett High School did this year, we have an open door policy. We certainly want people to make appointments, but at the high school, Mr. Knowlton and his team set up during the day parent informational evening so that parents could come in and see what the high school was like during the day for incoming 9th grade parents. And there was a good turnout. And I want parents to know that, sometimes you have a memory or one situation that has happened to you, and that fogs your future perception of some place. Things have changed, I think, in the district, and will continue to change and improve, and I think it's important for people to know that. So if something happened 3 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 2 years ago, there may be different structures in place that were not existing to support kids, because we are continually, all schools continually try to improve. So I would give a shout out to people to be curious, to come and see our schools and call the principals, because things have changed, and they will continue to change.
Thank you. Continuing with the superintendent's report, the principal report, Mr. Knowlton from Bartlett High School. Again, I would just ask that you bring the mic a little closer to you so that Mrs. Perangeli doesn't get mad at me that it doesn't work well. Not that she ever.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening again. I'm going to start tonight by talking about our student walkout event that occurred in conjunction with the national school walkout events around the country. I can't say enough about the work, the cooperation of all of the students that took part in planning the event and the cooperation of our entire student body when the event actually took place. Our event was supposed to be out on the field, was where we were intending to walk out, but 2 feet of snow precluded that. So on the fly, we had to kind of change gears and go into the gymnasium. And again, with the cooperation of the staff, the students, it went off without a hitch. Everybody went in there. We didn't miss a beat. Our banner with the pledge of, for support to the victims in the other school shootings around the country, as well as our pledge to work together to keep our schools and communities safe places. That banner was signed by just about everybody, I believe, that was there. It's full of signatures. It's hanging in our cafeteria. If you happen to be in our neighborhood and you would like to come by and sign it, please feel free to do so. So the kids, everyone, the whole school really came together, and it really was a nice event, and I'm very proud of especially our kids and how they handled it. Ms. Haenig's group, the DECA competition, we were fortunate to have 2 students qualify in the DECA competition in Boston a couple of weeks ago. Connor Brennan and Dylan Thomas will be attending the National DECA competition in Atlanta, Georgia from the 20th to the 25th of April. It's the first time in 15 years that we've had students qualify for this event. They'll be joining 10,000 other kids from around the country and competing in various events. And our guys will be competing in business law. So congratulations to Ms. Haenig and her DECA students, and we wish them well. We already alluded to the fact that it's MCAS season, and we started our MCAS testing today on the ELA long comp for grade 10. Last week, our entire staff went through the usual training sessions, which we have to do to be in compliance with testing. So they were all, went through the training. And yesterday, to kick it off, as we do every year, we had a PowerPoint presentation and kind of a little pep rally and a day of encouragement for the sophomores, reminding them of the significance of it and the testing procedures and so on and so forth. So that went very well. And they finish up with English next week on Monday and Tuesday. Also, the last thing, and I believe you have it in your packet, is our school improvement plan for next year. And with that, all year long, we have been talking about MCAS scores, the low achievement of our subgroups and their performance on the MCAS tests. Recently, on February 27th, the graduation and dropout rates were published in the Telegram and Gazette. You may have seen that article. So we have had a school improvement plan now. I mean, every year we have it, and every year we review it, we update it. And what you have in front of you is our updated school improvement plan, and addressing achievement gaps and addressing graduation and dropout rates is really nothing new. We've always done that. Just about every goal in this packet addresses student success and achievement in some way, shape, or form. But we have gone through, we've been working on this for the last couple of months. We've been working on it with the aid of Sarah Jordan from DSAC. And we have goals 1 through 5 have been reread and tweaked, and a few things added or deleted here or there. I don't want to go through the entire packet for you tonight. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read it or will read it. But goal number 6 is the one that most recently has been put together, which that is the one that more intensively focuses on, and we've talked about this all year, that the high school is in a good position now to really do some intensive, in-depth looking at curriculum alignment, instruction, assessment. And if you go through and you look at the action steps within goal 6, that's pretty much what this one really addresses: the academic curriculum, quality of instruction and assessment things that we're really going to try to really focus on and go hard at in the future. We have some of the interesting parts here. Janice Daniels, and working with DSAC, we have an $18,000 grant that's going to provide us with professional development. We have a summer institute planned for training for our instructional team leaders. We're going to be working on foundations of inclusive practices, co-teaching, all of those things that specifically target our at-risk students in our lower performing groups. So this is, and as you know from our conversations at the last meeting when we looked at the Galileo scores, you've already been told about all of the curriculum issues that are going to be addressed, like in math with Looney Math. Our English curriculum is going to be looked at for alignment. So all of these things we've tried to address in here. This plan was shared with and approved by our BHS Advisory Council, and today it was shared with our leadership team, and Mary Ann was there as well. And I think, you know, we talk about so many things, as Superintendent Gogan talked about tonight. We're looking at registration forms, and we're looking at curriculum, and we're looking at instruction and student attendance. And I think today, in reviewing this with our leadership team at least, several of the people in the room felt that this document kind of brought all those spinning dishes kind of into one perspective, that, oh, this is what all of this makes sense now. So we think that this is a good document. We hope that it's going to, moving forward, it's going to address, it's not going to perform miracles, but we're hoping that it's going to really address some of the significant issues that we have with our low-performing groups. And along the same lines, something I would like to point out is that if you read the Telegram and Gazette article that was in on February 27th, and there was some good and some bad in that article. I mean, it talked about how our graduation rate increased by 7%. Well, that's encouraging for us. On the other hand, we also had the lowest graduation and dropout rate in Central Mass. Clearly, nobody's happy about that. No one's content with that, and this is evidence of us trying to address that and move forward with it. But I think the other part of the article that caught my eye was, if you recall, about half the article was an interview with Jeremy Roach, who was the principal at I'm losing my... Fitchburg, yes. Fitchburg High School. So when I first came here 4 or 5 years ago, we were having students retained in 9th grade at the rate of about anywhere from 25 to 30 kids every year. And through some of our presentations and other literature, and in that article, Jeremy talks about how high school graduation and predictors of high school success are how well you navigate grade 9. And knowing that, and knowing Jeremy and the school within a school program that he put into his school back in 2011, 2012, we went up and visited with him in 2014. And from our visit with him is where we basically borrowed his idea of school within a school, which became our STRONG program that we have for our 9th graders. Incidentally, while we were up there, they also had, for their high-performing students, they had a partnership with Fitchburg State College, which gave us the idea to start the Nichols Honors Academy. But in Jeremy's interview, he talked about how, because the reason he was interviewed is because their graduation rate for 2017 jumped up to about 85 or 86% thereabouts, from being historically in the very low 70 percentile. And he said from when they put that in for about 5 or 6 years, their changes in their graduation rate only went up by about 0.1% each year. So there was pretty much flat level growth for a long time. So the point is that what he tried to make is that it takes a little time, a little patience for these programs to take hold. And I think we should still be hopeful that here we are in only our 3rd year. We haven't even had a strong class graduate yet. They're just seniors now. That hopefully in time, when all these things are in place firmly and over time, that we're going to see a similar incremental jump that they did. Can't promise that, but that's our hope. And we also called Jeremy after we read the article and asked him what are some of the things that he's doing for the kids when they leave the ninth grade program, because we've experienced problems with once they, because it's about relationships. They're in smaller classes, they're with a team of teachers, but when when our kids leave, now all of a sudden it's like you're pushing the bird out of the nest, go fly. So he gave us some ideas of what they have begun to try to do because they experience the same thing. So you'll see a little language about that in here too, about the idea of looping and things like that. So I just thought I would share that with you, that there is still hope if things go the way it did in Fitchburg. If anyone has any questions, that concludes my report.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Yeah, just,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just a quick question, and you might not even be able to answer this because it's more or less just predictions, but since this year is our first strong class that's getting ready to graduate, do you have an estimate of how that is going to impact the graduation rate this year? Do we know what change?
I don't have that right
No,
now.
okay, yeah, I know it's kind of tough.
Because the other part of it, and I've shared reports with the superintendent, with those high-risk kids, because we've tracked them up to this point. There are also, a lot of them are kind of transient. So I'm not even sure how much, we didn't have big retention rate. Every year since that program was put in, we've gone from 25 to 30 kids being retained and repeating grade 9 to no more than 5 in the worst year. In those 3 years, it's been anywhere from 2 to 5 kids. So the kids have been promoted. They've earned their way out of ninth grade, being pretty successful for the most part. But as we've tracked them over time, some of them have moved away. They've, not many dropped out, very few. So I'm hoping that it's going to be a good graduation for us this year with those kids being successful.
Thank you.
I would just like to add one comment, that you are working towards this, and we continue to look at graduation rates and dropout rates. And the Department of Education is offering a workshop, which Mr. Knowlton and his team is informed about this spring on April 25th, to really focus on graduation dropout and really look at the ninth grade and give more ideas to all the schools across the state on how to make sure that kids are successful in ninth grade, because that's the predictor for dropouts. So we'll be sending a team to that.
So I'll follow up with Mr. Shenovert and ask you a question that you probably can't answer, because that's fair. You alluded to, obviously, the transient population that is the reality of our town. I know the state doesn't track it this way, but have we ever internally looked at what our rates are for students that have been in our district for X number of years, let's say a minimum of 5 or 6 years, versus what the rates are for students that have been with us less than 2 years? Obviously, my question is, I'm guessing, but we may not be able to prove it through the data, that a portion of the children who are either dropping out and or not graduating are from, obviously, this high-risk transient population. And there's nothing we can do about that. That's the reality of a segment of our community. But do we have any sense of what our rates would be if you just took what I would consider our core Webster student?
I can say this, that the first, I want to say maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years that Barbara Mal, because we started together. When we became aware of the dropout rate and the non-graduate graduation rates and so forth, we looked at that. And we found that over the 2 or 3 years or whatever that we looked at that, when you looked at our dropout population, give or take about 50% of the kids that were dropping out were transient population kids that were not Webster kids over a long period of time. And I can tell you right now that just in my experience in the 6 years I have been here, we have kids that will transfer in, be here for a few days, never come back.
Or come back for a second time and drop out for a second time?
Right, but they don't count that. My understanding is they don't count it as a dropout twice.
Okay.
But still, I mean, what happens is we have these transient population of kids that come in. Sometimes they're coming in as 18-year-old freshmen and sophomores. They're already behind the 8 ball. They're credit deficient. They're court involved. Whatever the case may be, they're bringing baggage that we're scrambling to try to make up And sometimes, I mean, and we try with all of them. In fact, we even, through our guidance department, we have a peer mentoring program that Nancy Guiney runs. With any new student that comes in, she hooks those kids up right away with our peer mentors to try to help get them to ease into Bartlett High School and make them feel welcome and who they can find help with. But I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of what we had noticed. I have not looked at that recently.
Okay. And my next question, you may have just answered. Obviously, in the almost 6 years you've been here, I know there's been a tremendous amount of effort by your admin team, Nancy and others in the guidance, social adjustment world with Quest, et cetera. And the data indicates, even though the numbers have improved, we haven't improved as much as almost every other school in Central Mass. What has been your greatest challenge as the principal in the last 6 years with regards to dropout rates and graduation? And if you had an unlimited checkbook, which none of us do, what are some of the things that you would like to put in place that right now currently can't fit in the budget constraints? Those are two loaded questions, I get it.
Yeah, that's, I think right now where our staff is, with the supports we have, with the administration, with the counseling staff, I think we're at a good place right now, where I think our kids are supported by the people we have. I think our above state average attendance rate, which we have been for the last couple of years, shows our kids want to come to school. They're coming regularly almost every single day. And I just think that some of the things that we have, I just think it takes a little, like Jeremy said in his article, I think some of this stuff can't be fixed overnight. I don't know if I have a definitive answer for you, but I think we're in a good place right now with the staffing we have, especially the support staff and administration, that to continue to support the kids. And now, coupled with the work that we're going to look at in terms of curriculum and academics and quality of instruction, and a lot of it has to do with relationships.
Right.
And I pointed that out with the strong team. Those kids, they went from being the high-risk kids coming from the middle school with the worst attendance and all the other demographics that put them in that EWIS data as being high risk. And they went from being the worst attendance group consistently to being the highest attendance group each year, because they're in a small group environment with teachers that they know, that work together, that communicate regularly. It's all about relationships and comfort levels for them. And they want to come to school. And I think if we can continue to put those supports in place for all of our kids, especially the high-risk kids. I mean, we have a whole bunch of other kids, like our Nichols Honors Academy and other great kids that are doing fine, and they do fine anywhere probably. I mean, we can't necessarily take the credit for all of them. They're just great kids. They're bright kids. For those kids, I think it's just us continuing to provide those with rigorous opportunities and challenging courses. And but these other kids, I think we're on the right track. And obviously, with additional funding, if we could open the checkbook, there's more we could do.
Right.
My concern is, I just don't want to see all of the things that we've done over time to put us where a position now to start slipping away, and we slide back to where the school was 6 or 7 or 8 years ago.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Again, thank you for your report. Next item on the agenda is the business manager's report. Good evening, Mrs. Perangeli.
Good evening. Thank you. It certainly has been a busy couple of weeks. Starting to catch up on some sleep from all the storms. I think spring is finally here, so I'm pretty happy about that. It felt good to be outside for about 20 minutes today in the sun. I think it was almost 50, so that was happy. The last couple of weeks have been busy with inspections and audits and going over reports. So I'm happy to say that this past on the March 22nd, the superintendent and I attended the FinCom meeting. We started out the meeting being asked some follow-up questions from a meeting we had with Doug Willitson earlier on in the week. we have entered negotiations with our teaching staff, and we were just getting an idea of the status of the town. Where's the town going? What are we going to do with insurance? And Mr. Willison had asked us if, about our budget, and moving forward, they're looking at any additional income that might be received by the town, if we would consider looking at that additional income as a 70-30 split, 70% for the school department, 30% for the town. So at that time, we had said, we're certainly open to working as a collaborative team. That wasn't the point of the meeting at that time, but we said we're certainly willing to sit down and take a look at any additional items coming in and discuss them as a group, as a collaborative effort. When we went to FinCom, one of the first questions we were asked that evening is that, they were notified that we agreed to look at any additional income at a 70-30% split. So we did inform them that, yes, Mr. Willitson did ask us about that, and we would be taking a collaborative approach with them. We're certainly willing to sit down and to discuss it, but we haven't even had the opportunity to come and discuss that with school committee and update them to have a group discussion on our own. So I know we have a meeting coming up, a tri-board meeting, and I expect it to be brought up at that meeting, looking at the budget moving forward. So just keep that in mind as, any additional income that they're going to be looking for a collaborative effort from, which we're certainly open to. I think the administrator has been very good to the school department and favorable and understands the important need of education and what that means to the community. But I just think we should be open to discussion and, address it as a prioritized maybe need over the community. So that's something we'll look to. But as we presented the school budget, Superintendent Gogan discussed our mission and how we approached the budget and how we tackled and looked at programming within, and how we took a look at what's working, what's not working, how can we reallocate resources before we started to look at adding resources, and that approach. And the Finance Committee seemed very happy with that approach and was pleased with the discussion. They had some good questions. We could answer most of the questions. A couple of them we said we'll get back with more information, so we're doing that. I'll be emailing Mr. Gabor tomorrow morning, first thing tomorrow morning, with the answers to those questions. But overall, I think it was a very positive meeting. I'm excited to see the board really looking to take a collaborative approach and listening and working with us. And I'm really pleased at the way we're going to move forward. So I'm happy about the meeting.
I would agree. I think the meeting went very well. I think the questions were good questions, and we definitely wanted them to understand that we didn't want to, we had to bring the 70-30 to you, but we like the approach of taking a look as a team at what the town's priorities are. There might be a year when something happens where the town needs more money than the school. There might be a year when the school needs more money, and instead of a clean cut, 70-30, that collaborative approach seemed, especially for me being so new with the district and the town, we let them know that.
Yep.
And I think that the whole event went very well. And I'm looking forward to Monday's meeting, which I attended last year as an observer. So,
Really?
yes, I did.
And you came back?
I came back. I came back. It wasn't that bad.
No, it was good last year.
Yeah.
No. And I think we're going into this meeting knowing that we have a balanced budget.
Yep.
So for the upcoming year, we're all in agreement moving forward. I think everybody's on the same page with that. It's looking at long-term and what the impact is going to be for the town of Webster long-term over the next 2, 3, 4 years. And talking about what kind of things we can look at, that collaborative approach. One of the things that Mr. Gabor did bring up is he was pleased that, we were looking at other options, although it didn't pan out for us this year. The Central Mass Planning Commission for the for transportation, you know, he appreciated our participation in that, our willingness to go out and look for something different, and to see if there's other opportunities out there that we can possibly save money, get better deals. So they were pleased to see that level of support. So we're
And
happy
I'm
with
glad
that.
you shared the story about how it didn't work out for other communities, because most people would think when you collaborate with other districts, you're going to save money, but in reality, it's
Right.
not always the case.
I mean, typically when you're buying in bulk,
Right.
you're gonna save. But every community is a little different. And with transportation, it's different. It's not just buying fuel. You know, there's different unions, there's different prevailing wages in some communities and not other communities. So it's hard to, well, there might be savings for one community, it can certainly cost another community a lot of money, and they're seeing that out there. So it's a difficult path to navigate. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I really don't. I wish I had it, a little magic wand, but I don't. We'll just have to keep, you know, plugging forward, moving forward, and listening and being open to new opportunities. I think that's the most important thing for us to be listening and an active participant. The second thing on the report is a HERA report. So a HERA is known as the Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act. This is not something new. It's been around for quite some time. Really what this act is it's about notifying, inspect school buildings on their own for asbestos-containing materials, and you need to have a plan in place for any building that might have asbestos. This has been around for a very long time. What's different about it now is they're actually going out and inspecting schools. In the past, we went to a training about a year ago. She said she was pretty much the only inspector in the state of Massachusetts. And they really seem to be narrowing down on looking at schools with asbestos and making sure there are plans in place, updated plans in place on how you're going to manage that, because with renovations, school building projects going on, you know, you're just disturbing. So they want to make sure there's plans in place. And we do have plans in place. I'm happy to say that they went to Park Ave in middle school. They just show up unannounced. They go up to the front desk and they say, can we see your HERA plan, please? And staff in the office is supposed to know where to find that and pull it out and show them. Even though they're new schools, Park Ave just opened 2 years ago and there is no asbestos in the school, we're still required to have a plan on file. That plan could just include a notification letter, who's the person who's a designated a HERA contact, and an architect letter statement saying that there's no asbestos in the school. That is the plan. So they would need to see that. And they stopped at the middle school and Park Ave. Both plans were in place. So please, kudos to Mr. Avlis, who's not here to reap the, you know, the applause for that. But it's good, because a lot of people don't do this and don't have plans in place. And for them to come out and just ask for it and have everything in order is good job by him for getting that done. So that concludes my report for now. I will be back with a couple items later on.
Sounds good. Any questions or comments from the committee? And again, just a friendly reminder, our tri-committee meeting is next Monday, April 2nd at 6:30 in the Board of Selectmen's room down at the Town Hall.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the student update. Laiz Napoli. Good evening, Laiz. How are you?
I'm good. How is everybody?
Good, thanks.
So I have a couple of academic announcements. Tomorrow night is going to be college admissions night at Bartlett, so that's going to be starting at 6:30, and it's really important for the juniors to be seniors to attend. Ms. Dobro is behind an opportunity for any interested sophomores to attend an all-expenses-paid leadership conference in a college setting for 3 days in June. And MCAS testing took place in the library this morning. The sophomores did the ELA long comp. The prom theme has been voted on. It will be Enchanted Garden, and it's going to take place at the newly renovated Indian Ranch. Tickets are going to start to go on sale after April vacation for $65 each. The class of 2020 sold little Easter eggs with messages on them during all lunches this week, and they're going to be delivering them tomorrow at the end of the day. The French Travel Club had a bake sale on Monday, a continuation of that bake sale today, and they sold hot chocolate in the morning last week before classes started for the students to raise money for their trip. And Empty Bowls Night is going to be held on April 6th. Any seniors who need volunteer hours can contact Mr. Harrington and see if they can get a couple of hours for helping out at this event. I would like to congratulate the show choir group. Impressions placed fourth in their small mixed division competition in Andover this weekend. The spring sports parent meeting was held in the auditorium at 6 p.m. on Monday, March 26th. The farm to school program today, it was really nice in the cafeteria. The table looked great, the food tasted great, the music sounded great. Thank you to the band for playing. That was really nice. It created a very fun environment in the cafeteria. And this week we also did our lockdown drill. I forgot to write that in my report, but everything went well, everything ran smoothly. So thank you to the police department, everybody who helped out. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the? Thank you. Since we have three special guests with us this evening, unless the committee objects, I'm going to jump over old business and start with new business. The first item under new business is Senator Ryan Fatman and Representative Joseph McKenna budget discussion. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening. We had asked Mrs. Gogan a couple of meetings ago to reach out to both of you to join us, primarily, and I'm probably going to state what you've probably heard from every other board and committee that you've met with in the last couple of months. Obviously, we on a local level have been struggling for many, many years in trying to fund what we need to with regards to educational and student support programs with the state law that in addition to growth, obviously, local revenue cannot increase more than 2.5%. The state recognized that, I think it was 2 to 2.5 years ago, and formed the Foundation Budget Review Commission, which for those who might be watching and are unaware, I actually, based on what I saw with regards to how the commission was formed and the practice they took in gathering their information and the report that they compiled, I was very impressed actually with the process they took and the recommendations that they've made. That's the good news. The bad news is they've identified that the educational system across the Commonwealth is underfunded by billions, which is not an easy solution. Obviously, I'm sure you're both aware that almost every community around us in the last 3 or 4 years has attempted a 2.5 override. You know, Douglas, I think, just announced their third. We tried one 2 years in a row, a couple years ago. Dudley Charlton is a week from today. So we're not alone in trying to deal with the significant expenses that are incurred by almost every school district, primarily special ed, transportation, and health insurance. Obviously, those are the three main categories that were identified in the Budget Review Commission. So I guess my question for you this evening is, if everyone's aware that there's a problem, I think one of my frustrations, primarily as a parent and then secondarily as a member of this committee, is it seems as though the state has not aggressively addressed the funding issues that we have. What is your opinion of what's been, first of all, in that report, what do you think is going realistically to occur in this next fiscal year? I know the governor released his budget. Both your houses are in the process of, I'm guessing, putting together the initial draft of the House and the Senate budget. Where do you think we go on a statewide level with regards to trying to appropriately fund not just the Webster Public Schools, that's our main concern, but you know, I think every school in your districts are having the same issue.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having us tonight. If I could take that in a second, I just wanted to welcome publicly Ms. Gogan for the first time, because I have not been able to come to a meeting since she's been superintendent. I had a very nice meeting with her back in the summer, I believe, and end of the summer. I was very impressed, and I think she'll serve the Webster community very, very well, as she already is. And one of the things I really like about the leadership right now in Webster, between Mr. Willardson, Ms. Gogan, it seems like people are really trying to work together. And you don't always see that in towns, which can be very frustrating. And it makes everybody's jobs, whether locally elected, state elected, or day-to-day professionals, a lot more difficult. So just want to say thank you for that effort. Yeah, this has been, I think for us, it's like the #1 issue, because the districts that we represent are so heavily dependent upon state aid. Other districts across the state aren't necessarily as dependent, but when you look at our districts, you know, somewhere between 75 to 97% of revenue that's generated locally is residential property taxes. And that is a big portion of anybody's budget, and to be reliant that much is so significant. And then when you talk about over the last decade, the volatility in state aid, whether it be the unrestricted general government aid or Chapter 70, Chapter 90 for roads, these have all been real big challenges. I truly do believe that the solution is right around the corner. Part of the reason why it's taken so long, you know, in 1993, they create this education reform. It's pretty unique. I think it showed that it worked to try to get us to number one, which was the goal, you know, across the country. And we have, you know, essentially we rank number one in pretty much every metric for math and science and English. But the problem is, you know, kind of now that the world has changed since 1993, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, just by way of example. You know, there's things that need to change with it. Healthcare, for example, you know, all the numbers that we based the Chapter 70 formula on are on 1993 numbers. That's ridiculous. And we all know how much healthcare has increased over the course of the last few decades. You know, to kind of just do an overall picture, which I like to do when we have these types of meetings, I like to talk about where we've been, where we are right now, where I think we're going. Because if you had asked me in October, you know, where we were going, I was going to tell you I'm very nervous. We were looking at 200, at least from a state's perspective, we were looking at about $200 to $300 million budget deficit for the current fiscal year. Revenues were lagging behind greatly, even though the economy was seemingly heading in the right direction, which is a huge concern. November continued that trend, yet it shrinked a little bit. And then the saving grace was December. Now, there's a lot of opinions as to why, but $779 million more dollars over the benchmark came in. It was the highest collection in state's history over benchmark. And it basically corrected every problem from a state revenue standpoint, put us in the black, and it's continued that trend. Now, some people forecast that the reason that happened was tax reform was looming on the federal level, so there was a lot of people who prepaid their taxes, and perhaps that created a bump. I sit on the Revenue Committee in the legislature for the Senate, and we asked the commissioner, at the time it was Michael Heffernan, he since has graduated and helped create this budget that the governor proposed, but he said it was too early to really be able to tell, but he said the trend was a good thing. And the trend has continued month over month over the course of the last 3 months. We've been in the black and actually in the green, heading in the right direction. So when our business manager says we have a balanced budget, that gives me a sigh of relief to that extent, because if there was a problem on the state level, obviously that would trickle down with Chapter 70. You know, I think the good news with the governor's budget that he proposed for Webster being about $300,000 over what he had proposed the year before, I always tell towns that's the baseline. You know, it doesn't get worse than that. And with the way the budget works, the House takes it up first, the Senate takes it up second, and usually the Senate comes in with a better Chapter 70 number, not because we like schools better, but because we have a better picture of where the revenue is, because we're the last one to take a bat at it. So you'll see, you know, year over year, if you look at some of the numbers, they do increase more for the Senate than they do for anything else, just because we're the last part of the process. And I do see that trend continuing. I had to sit down with the chairwoman of Ways and Means last Monday. That's Karen Spilka, who is going to be the next Senate president. And she said, revenue-wise, things are looking really good. We feel very positive about the budget. You know, for anybody in our local delegation, we always talk about increasing per pupil funding. This year, we've asked that to be $100 per student. We asked for circuit breaker increases. This year, we're asking for a 75% funding level, you know, which would be a high for a while, for the first time in a while. And, regional transportation, which doesn't necessarily affect Webster's district, but, right next door, it does affect Dudley Charlton. So these are things that we constantly advocate for. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Joe, and I'm happy to, I have some other things I'd like to add, but I don't want to take all the oxygen out of the room. I think when it comes to the Chapter 70 formula, the biggest question mark is what you identified, Mr. Chairman, which is how do you fund it? And that always becomes a very controversial thing. We have a $40 billion budget. Education makes up more than 10% of that budget, which is very significant. There's a ballot initiative that's a constitutional amendment, that's surtax. The polling for it is very high, and that's probably going to be the funding mechanism for Chapter 70, the Foundation Review Commission's recommendations. I do think there's an honest argument that has to be made about, is it a good idea to do a constitutional amendment to tell the legislature how to spend money? Because priorities change, and this is going to be a lot of money potentially coming in. I just came from a meeting with a family who lost their husband and father. That's why I was a little bit late, I'm sorry. But they don't have AEDs in police vehicles. And I didn't realize that until I sat down with them. Police vehicle shows up in their house in Mendon. The daughter's an EMT and says, "Where's the AED?" And the police officer says, "We don't have one." So, budget priorities, it just highlights, it's a small, budget priority, but it highlights sort of the human face behind it. So, there's a lot of good causes out there. We're also dealing with WRTA issues for this town. There's an $8 million cut there. That's going to affect a lot of people, working people who rely upon the WRTA to get to work or school or the hospital. So, but I do think that that is likely to pass in the next session, which would be the 91st legislative session. I think it's very likely that the legislature will take up the education reform. Last thing I'll say on this is members of my caucus had identified $265 million that we felt could be a down payment on the $1.5 to $2 billion that they say is needed for the Foundation Review Commission's recommendations. And that money would basically just not a priority for me and for I think a lot of people is the funding of the Boston Convention Center, which is $1 billion project. And at a time when conventions have been shrinking nationwide. So we said, let's take some of the funding mechanism for that and move it towards the Chapter 70 formula. And that was $265 million. Unfortunately, the proposal didn't get passed, but it did get bipartisan support. And I think it was like 16 or 17 votes in the Senate, which in a membership of 40 is significant. So, we're going to continue to advocate for this, and I think there'll be more to come for sure. I'll turn it over to Representative McKenna.
Yeah, thank you. And the luxury of going second, as Ryan has said, much of what I was going to say, so hopefully I'll be brief and won't be too
You can
redundant.
repeat it. People love it. Say the same thing
You
over.
have to say it like 7 times in order for it to sink in.
And I do also want to point out on the inspection on the asbestos, I have no relation whatsoever to Janet McKenna, the engineer who inspected. So just want to disclose that. No relation whatsoever.
Not there are any conflict of interest laws in this.
No, no.
People like to follow.
Exactly. But as was mentioned, I share some of your frustrations, Mr. Chairman, on the delayed response to the Foundation Budget Review Commission. I was similarly very excited to have gone to a couple of those hearings, to have seen how seriously everyone on that commission took the process and how seriously they took the report. And it was something with hard, firm recommendations. And my hope was that it wasn't going to be pushed aside. And regretfully, it kind of has up until now. And just some color as to the gaps, as Ryan had touched on, it's the human resources, the healthcare, and the special ed costs that have increased at a significant percentage greater than was accounted for in the original formula. So that gap has grown consistently over the past 24, 25 years since the original education reform, and that has now created the significant gap. And as a little bit of context as to the budget situation that we're in, as a colleague and a friend of mine likes to consider it, we are a state health plan with a budget attached. We have the $40 billion budget that Senator Fatman mentioned, of which high 40% is dedicated exclusively to healthcare costs. Mass Health alone takes up close to half, probably going to exceed half of the state's budget. A significant other amount of the budget is simple federal pass-through that comes from federal programs that have strings attached that need to be allocated in certain ways. So that leaves the discretionary fund relatively small when you're looking at a $40 billion budget. It's much smaller than you might think at first glance. So that's the difficulty in finding those discretionary funds and making sure that they do go where they need to go. That being said, I know Senator Fatman and myself have supported increases in per pupil, increases in overall Chapter 70 year after year after year. And in fact, in the packet that went around was a letter that both of us signed on to calling for a number of aggressive funding increases on a number of education-related accounts. So we're certainly hearing that call from our district very loud, very clear, and doing what we can to push that in the state legislature. And just a quick comment on the sheet that I passed out. It's information you all have and you've all seen, so I know it's redundant, but I did figure it was a appropriate place to put it forward. You can see that based on the calendar that we have here, as Ryan mentioned, the Chapter 70, the House tries to increase each year, and the Senate does a larger increase. More often than not, the Senate number is the final number. That percentage at the end of the column is the percentage increase in the final budget over where the governor's recommendation originated. So taking that average over the past 3 years, which is those budgets that have been advanced by Governor Baker and by Senator Fatman and myself, the average increase at the end of the budget has been about 4 to 5, or a half of a percent.
Right.
So if this year holds true and the final budget comes in about a 0.5% higher than the governor's recommendation, that is that $12,607,000.
Well, you can keep the B there if you want. That's not a problem.
I would love to.
We'll share it with our neighbors too.
Yeah, so that's the rationale behind those numbers there, so.
So Mr. McKenna had shared this letter with me prior to the meeting, and obviously these are really important items that you've identified, and I think I counted between 45 and 50 representatives and senators. Based on what I know, again, it's Republican, Democrats, rural, city. Realistically, and I know it's still early, what are the chances that these items actually get funded in either House or Senate budget and get signed by the governor? Is this a wish list that looks good on paper but would be difficult to actually fund, or is this something that seriously could get funded this year? Because this would be critical to us.
I wouldn't budget for it, I'll say that.
Well, we haven't, but yeah.
And I wouldn't make any changes in that practice. It's certainly something that we're striving for, but to put them all on one budget, as the letter does, is a little optimistic at best as well. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that, as I said before, things are in an upward projection, so that's a good thing. The old saying, don't let the perfect be enemy of the good, somewhat applies. But I also think, when it comes to this type of letter, Representative McKenna has this experience, I have this experience. We are allowed the opportunity to go in and sit down with the chair of Ways and Means, whoever it might be, and they say, what are your top 3 priorities, right? So boom, boom, boom. Those are pretty much outlined in that letter. And for 40, I can't speak for everybody who's signed, but that's exactly what I talk about when I go into those meetings and I tell them, for example, Southbridge is in dire need right now. They're in a really tough position. I talked a lot about Southbridge and sort of their budget. Not analogous to Webster necessarily, but we never want to see Webster ever get to that point. And so, that's why I always make that a priority. A second thing that I've started mentioning, which is a practice that Representative McKenna and I started putting into place in 2015 when we came into office, is to try to learn about local priorities that towns have, whether it be, by way of example, the Webster Lake Association, who approached us back in 2014, saying, this is something we desire, there's a part of the lake we'd like to clean up. If you can get us $125,000, we'll be able to do it. Joe and I went to bat for that, and we did it, and the benefits of that played out into the summer of 2016. They cleaned up Reed Smith Cove, I believe it was. And a year ago, Shepherd Hill came to me, and they said, we have a need for a bus or a generator. We can't make up our mind, our generator failed, the bus is going to fail. Do you think you could get some money? So what I like to do is concentrate on capital items, not necessarily programmatic, because what's here today could be gone tomorrow based on the whims of the economy and the budget, but capital items that we could influence the process of getting money for and taking that budgetary concern off of your plate. In the town of Sutton, a few years back, it was textbooks that were required for the new curriculum. It was a $50,000 budget line item, put forward the money, got it in the budget, the town of Sutton got those, and then it opened up the $50,000 perhaps for another capital investment that you weren't necessarily planning on, or adding in some sort of programmatic, AP class that didn't exist before or something like that. So I wanted to mention that because that's something that we would definitely be interested in, down the road hearing about. I'm not sure it would be possible for this budget, but next year's budget, if there's some large item that we could help take off the town's plate and help fund, we would absolutely go to bat for that.
Mr. Chair, may
Yes,
I?
Mrs. Gogan. You have a list already.
There's a list.
Since you're here.
Since you're here, I know you've heard from many superintendents across the state, myself included, and I want to thank you for writing the letter on behalf of us. I was hoping to get an update on where you really think the circuit breaker is going to land. The difference between 65% reimbursement and 75% reimbursement is about $90,000 for us, which is substantial. And I wanted to sort of gauge where that was. I have only 3 questions. So that's one.
My opinion is it's probably going to end around 70.
Okay.
Like we said, the trend has been the house increases from 65 to perhaps 70. Perhaps the Senate goes to 75, and then when they try to hash out the differences in the conference committee by July, I think, if I put on my cap of looking forward, that's probably where it ends up around. So maybe $45,000 increase.
Okay. And again, I just want to personally stress the importance of that with our special education costs and increasing every year, that all districts would benefit from that.
Yeah.
My second question is, the governor's budget had about $5 million included in the budget allocated for opioid school funding. Do you have more information on that?
I don't know if you do, but we will
Okay.
certainly look into that.
I would appreciate it. And then, as you know, they're talking about social studies curriculum and updating the social studies curriculum and including a service learning part in that new curriculum when it gets approved. And I was wondering if there's been any discussion about funding, helping schools fund that service learning piece that may be added.
I'm really glad that you asked that question.
And in that way.
And in that way, yeah. So as the discussion was going on, I leaned over to Representative McKenna and I said, Joe, have you guys taken up that bill that you referenced? Because we did last week. I was one of 4 people who voted against it. I agree with every tenet that they're trying to institute. I think it's very laudable. It creates a trust fund to fund this with no appropriation of money. I had 2 amendments, one that I was a co-sponsor on, one that I was the author of. The co-sponsorship was to appropriate the money. That didn't happen. The one that I sponsored was to allow the state auditor, who is supposed to handle unfunded mandates as part of her vocation, to do an analysis of what the unfunded mandate we were creating might be. And if it was found to indeed be an unfunded mandate, that the requirement for institutionalizing it would be waived. If a town wanted to do it, they could do it. they didn't have to as mandated by law with the bill. And it just goes back to me, every time I come to these meetings, when I talk to people who are working in municipal government, it's the same frustration. You tell us to do more with less. Please stop doing that. It's as simple as that. And so that's what I said on the Senate floor, just, I can't in good conscience vote for this. You know, there's no money. And it was challenged, that statement was challenged because they said, well, we're not really creating an unfunded mandate. We will appropriate the money when the budget comes. We've seen that movie many, many times, and it just doesn't happen. Or we live up to that standard for a short period of time, like regional transportation funding for schools, and then we chop it at some point when no one's, you know, really paying attention, and that's not right to me. So just out of principle, I couldn't vote for it. Love the idea behind it, but you got to put the money where the mouth is.
Well, I just want to stress again how important it is for you to advocate for us at your level on behalf of the students that we serve, and the importance of meeting especially our special education population's needs, which are changing drastically in today's time, to keep that as a priority. And I will just state that we will be following up with you on a special project that we also have in mind that I will fall into the category of safety improvements. So you'll be hearing from us soon.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Did you, either one of you had anything to add?
Yeah, I will add just a plug for a bill that I've co-sponsored with a number of colleagues to institute carbon monoxide detectors in all school buildings. And there are two separate bills. One simply has the requirement. The bill that I'm pushing as a priority, to Senator Fatman's point, creates a funding mechanism with funds for the installation of those carbon monoxide tests. If you're aware, there was an incident in Douglas several years ago where there was a mass casualty. There was no deaths, but there was a number of students who were transported to the hospital with carbon monoxide poisoning. So that kind of has been an issue that the Douglas Fire Chief has been pushing very, very strongly. So I'm happy to support and push that bill. And also, I just wanted to bring back a conversation that we'd had, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Gogan, on the School Building Authority. Any support or help that we could possibly provide, whether that's bringing the School Building Authority here to have kind of collaborative, productive meetings on how best to frame an application, or simply supporting existing applications, we certainly stand very ready and willing to do that.
Thank you for writing the letter of support that we did submit with our application. And if we get notified, certainly we would have you here for their site visits, and we would continue to need your support. We, as you may know, have applied 6 times, and have not been accepted. So we're hoping that next year's lucky.
On that point, have you gotten feedback as to specifics as to why they were?
The
not
feedback
accepted?
is that our application is completed correctly, and there's nothing that we didn't do, and it's just that there's not enough money. There's not enough money supporting the programs, and they're prioritizing their needs and having a hard time prioritizing those needs. But we were complimented on our applications. Everything was submitted in a timely fashion. You know, we were hoping, you know, it was my first year here, and she said, nope, you guys did it all right.
Wouldn't change anything,
Yep.
just resubmit.
Yep.
And I think, recalling Mr. Avalos' comments, in the last few years, there's been some huge high school projects that have been funded. And when you have one project taking up over $100 million, one a year, let alone a couple a year, obviously, that takes up a significant amount of the money that's even available to fund everything in the state. So, once again, you know, thank you for coming this evening. I know you're both very busy. Obviously, our condolences to your constituents in Mendon, and I understand.
Thank you.
You know, we all want the same pie.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't want to share it. And just a friendly reminder that non-regional districts struggle with transportation costs as well. So that's something that, if ever in the future, can be looked at. We like our friends to get money, but we also struggle with that cost as well. But again, I guess I would finally say to anybody who might be watching, a concerned parent or community member, you know, please watch the budget process closely. Obviously, reach out to our elected officials and really focus on, hopefully, I understand it can't all be done at once, but I'm hoping that the rhetoric that is finally occurring and the lobbying groups, MASC and MASS and the other groups that speak for us, as well as individuals in your districts, certainly I think you're probably hearing from everybody that we need help. And, are we as bad off as some of the others? No, really, we're not. But still, the projection next year for Webster is the discussions from the town administrators indication it could be a very difficult year. So to your point regarding Southbridge, I mean, it's very sad to see what has occurred, and I don't want to get into a political discussion with regards to charter schools, but the amount of money that's been siphoned out of that district in support of the charter school in Sturbridge, we have some of that, but nowhere near, the numbers that they have there. So again, I thank you for your time, and, please hopefully continue to advocate for us and for the kids that we try to serve.
Just one last thing that I wanted to say, and I think it's fantastic when it happens. Joe and I have the opportunity once in a while to bring in kids to the State House. Sometimes it's sports teams that win championships. Sometimes it's Eagle Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. But there's this growing trend of having kids, especially at this time that we're living in, being very interested in history and politics and government, that they're sending government students into us that are really looking to maybe major in this one field one day in college. So I just wanted to say, if there's a government class out there that would like to come in from the high school, or even kids who are really interested in the process in the middle school, please send them our way. We give them a tour of the State House. We bring them into the governor's office, get their picture taken at the governor's chair, which is a memento that, lasts their whole life, and, buy them lunch and just have a great time. And we have this group, the Senate Youth Council is what I call it, Advisory Council. Connor Brennan, who's a senior, who has gotten into Georgetown and is applying to like every, I think, Ivy League school out there, is on that. And I know him and his partner just won the business law and ethics, came in third place statewide. So that's fantastic. But we'd love to see more than just Connor. Every once in a while, we'd love to have a bunch of group of kids. So.
And they just had a very successful mock trial season.
Yeah.
So I think, obviously, through Mr. Knowlton and Mrs. Gogan, we'll reach out, and
Right.
there might be some kids that would love to hang out with all you cool guys on Beacon Hill.
Fantastic.
Again, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Continuing with our agenda, moving on, we have another guest with us, Mrs. Haining, who is, first of all, next item is out-of-state field trip, Bartlett High School to Newport, Rhode Island. Mrs. Haining and Mr. Jennis are looking to take 45 to 50 students to Salve Regina on June 13th, 2018, and I will entertain a motion as such.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Did you want to add anything about the trip?
We'll also be touring the Vanderbilt Mansion because we talk about entrepreneurship in both of our classes. So a lot of the students are pretty excited to do that as well. So that'll be part of the day.
Great. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none. Laurie, would you poll the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is out-of-state field trip Bartlett, parentheses 2, students, I assume, not 2 Bartletts. DECA to Atlanta, Georgia. As the superintendent alluded to and Mr. Fatman just alluded to, 2 of our students have qualified for a DECA national program
No competition.
down in Atlanta, Georgia, from April 20th to April 25th. I assume, just a technicality, it will be signed by your office?
Yes.
Okay. Anything you wanted to add about this field trip?
Well, the chaperone will be Peter Carney, the music teacher. My husband has heart issues, and it's just not a good time for me to be that far away. So Peter Carney actually had, I asked him, and he said he would be more than happy to attend the competition with the boys. So he'll be chaperoning.
So I entertain a motion to approve the field trip to Atlanta as presented.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank Mrs. Honig for 18 years of being the DECA advisor. I had the luxury of being the judge at their competition in Boston and was highly impressed with the whole process. Our kids are gaining a lot of wonderful experiences through this, and I wish Connor and Dylan the best.
Thank you very much.
Let me, you stole some of my thunder, because I also wanted to follow up and just thank you, not only for being the DECA advisor, but one of our phenomenal teachers. I won't ask you how many years like I asked Mr. Knowlton, because that's not polite. But my own children, their friends, you know, you have been by far one of their favorite teachers for years and years and years. And I know the effort that you put in and the dedication that you have, and please know that it's truly appreciated, not only by this committee, but a lot of parents, and most importantly, a lot of the students that have gone through this building, so.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of great kids at the school. Great to work with. Today at the Farm to School program, I was telling Mrs. Gogan and Mr. Knowlton that I didn't even have to tell the students what to do. They just kind of took over, and they're jumping in, you know, the pictures, the videos. They had a really great time. So really great group of kids. I'm just totally impressed with them. So,
Um,
thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, Laurie, would you poll the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and good luck to the two wonderful students going to Georgia.
Thank you, thank you.
Going back to old business, under old business, the next item on the agenda is discussion/approval revised 2017-2018 calendar. Mrs. Gogan.
As you know, we have had 6 snow days, and the calendar needs to be adjusted. But before I brought the calendar to you, I did send out a survey to our staff with a number of different options. 65% of the faculty have given feedback that they would like the days to just be added on at the end of the year, making June 22nd our last day being a half a day of school. So I'm presenting that to the school committee for approval.
And was that for staff and parents, or was?
No, it didn't go to parents. It was going to go to parents, but when 65% of your staff say that they don't want to come any part of April vacation, we did not send it out to parents. That was the original intent, but
Understood.
yeah.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair. So just to clarify for those watching, the current date remains June 22nd.
Yes. but
However,
they-
should we have another snow day, which
Don't say that.
won't happen, then it would be moved to the 26th.
Correct. 25th,
25th, I'm sorry.
yes.
But we do actually need to entertain a motion to amend, because the current calendar actually had the last day being, oh gosh, I forget now. You remember, was it the?
12th.
12th?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. 21st.
So that's why we need an amendment, because we went over the 5.
We went over the 5.
So we do need a vote on the amended calendar to reflect the last day at this time as June 22nd, and I will entertain a motion as such.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shenever.
I make a motion to approve the amended calendar as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Laurie, would you pull the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Next item on the agenda under old business is superintendent mid-cycle goals. As the members will recall, Mrs. Gogan at our last meeting gave a very in-depth presentation of her entry plan to date, identifying, you know, what she has done, what her team has done, reviewing, I guess, the concerns and the positives that she's identified in the first 8 months of being our superintendent. After that presentation, I had asked the members to take a look at the mid-cycle goals progress report, which is part of the DESE evaluation system for superintendents. And I had asked each member to complete the report, submit it to me, and then what I did was consolidate everybody's responses into one report, which is what we're reviewing this evening. For the public record, all members ranked all of the goals up to this point as being on target. Some members did provide feedback, and that feedback is listed in the report for individual goals. And at this time, I will open it up to any questions or comments that either the members or Mrs. Gogan might have. Hearing none, just summarize, Mrs. Gogan. I think obviously all the members pretty much agree that we are very appreciative of your efforts. We are very appreciative of your honesty and transparency. I think looking at a lot of the, not to rehash what we discussed at the last meeting, but a lot of the concerns that we as parents and members may have had over the years being identified, putting plans in place. We understand it takes time. We may get frustrated with those timelines, but we will try our best to understand them. But overall, you know, your entrance into the district, I'll speak for myself, and if my colleagues would disagree, please obviously share their opinions. Have been very impressed with your overall progress to date. And we look forward to the continuation of this particular school year and probably looking at mid-May, I would guess, to start to look at your annual review with a completion, obviously, in June, prior to the June 30th date, which would be the last day of your first year. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continuing with new business, we will go to item D, which is FY18 Student Activity Audit Report. Mrs. Perangeli?
Yes, thank you
All
very
right.
much. So again, it is audit time of year. We felt with the student activities, it's a little different procedure. We are required to have an outside audit done on accounts that have more than $25,000 in balances every 3 years. So we can conduct internal audits. Myself, I can audit the elementary and the middle school because the funds that they turn over are not that great. We felt it was a very good time, actually, with 2 new principals coming in. We've had turnover in staff taking care of the student activity accounts at the elementary and the middle school. So we felt it was a very good time to have all 3 accounts audited by an outside auditor, and just to come back with any recommendations so we can train and teach new staff coming in and, you know, sit down with principals and discuss anything that they should keep an eye on and inform them moving forward. Overall, our audits came back very good. There's just a couple little minor issues that we need to address. You'll notice there was a theme between the 3 schools. We have had principal accounts set up at every school. They call them something a little different, but it's pretty much used as a general fund. So every year when students have their pictures taken, there's photo money that they get back. And that photo money has been put into our principal's general fund. Student activities is supposed to be funds for student activities that are raised, identified activities. So for instance, whether it be a club or something, an art club or a music club. Photos, there shouldn't be any general account set up. So the recommendation by the auditors was to move that money out of a principal into a specific account. So after speaking with the town accountants and reviewing that, we agreed it would be best to leave the money in the student activity, but set up a line item that says photo, you know, photo and miscellaneous for like box tops and stuff. So it's not going into a general fund, it's identified. It's really just labeling the account. They're not spending the money inappropriately, they're spending it for exactly the right stuff. They're using it for students. The money's all going back to students, whether it be student awards or student meals for attendance. So the money's being used appropriately. They really just didn't like the labeling of the account. So we'll be working with them to set up a new account there. And also, another thing that we need to separate out is the interest on the account. The interest has been moving into this account also, into this general fund. The interest should be put in its own account, identified separately. So we will also be doing that moving forward. The other items, which is basically housekeeping items. I know Park Ave had seen a couple bills paid where they paid sales tax. We're tax exempt. We shouldn't be paying any sales tax or reimbursing any sales tax. I seen one note where they paid off a statement. We should be paying off a statement. We should always be requesting invoices so we have the detail of what was purchased. Can't just reimburse off a statement. At the high school, we saw, there were some old inactive accounts, so those accounts should be cleared up, and I know the high school does that. So, I mean, the oldest account back is 2012. Typically, you have 3 years where if the account stays inactive, then you have a process that you start reaching out to organizations, and then you can move that money into different funds if you've gotten no response back. So overall, the audits came back very good. I'm working with the principals and the secretaries who manage those accounts and making any corrections necessary. And then we will be continuing to review them. What I'll probably do moving forward is I think the high school with the amount of activity should be done every 2 years. And then maybe I can alternate a year, have the elementaries done 1 year, and have the high school done on off years, so that way we're not getting it all at once. But I think this was a great start to have all 3 schools done at once, just with new staff, new principals, making sure that we're clear right from the beginning. Are there any questions on the student activity? No?
Just on the class 2012, 13, 15, 16. What have we done with those monies?
So those are the inactive accounts that they're saying that we need to address. So
Okay,
after
so that
3
those
years,
come in, those are part
like
of that?
15, 16, we're not doing anything yet because 15, we're just hitting our 3rd-year mark. So it's typically once they've been inactive for 3 years, and I can read you.
To post it.
Yeah, there's a process that you have to go through before you disperse the money. So you have to take an ad, I believe, looking for, I have the procedure here. Yeah, here we go. So it says that we should be recommending that we need to determine a policy for where to put that money. They'll be reaching out and advertising how that money should be spent, or making sure nobody can claim that. Typically, a check is given, and I know once students leave for inactive classes, so the graduating class, they will reach out to the class, and you need, I know they came into an issue with one, and I'm not sure if it's one of these years, where they didn't actually have more than one person to sign. You can't
So
just
they
hand
couldn't-
over a check. So they couldn't
get the money out.
get the money back to them without having the members. So I know they're working on that. It's something that, they're aware of. They know they need to address.
So would you disagree with the auditor's comment in item number 4 on page 3, where they indicate that the money should have been dispersed to respective class presidents long ago?
Yes, I do disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do disagree with that. Because if I'm looking at 15 and 16, those aren't even at the 3-year benchmark yet. So the 12 and 13 should have been done. We could have dispersed that and put it in, moved the money into another account. But I think that was a little strong for the language.
Unfortunately, it is a common occurrence in schools where kids raise their money and then they graduate and they leave the money. I had this situation in my last district as well, and it went back multiple years.
Yes, yeah.
And we had to put ads in the paper, and then you have to keep on doing it. And when you don't get any responses, then you have to make a decision.
Where to put the money.
Yeah.
And then item 6 regarding scholarships. Is that something that has typically occurred? Again, their opinion, and I've never heard of this honestly, that all grants and gifts for educational purposes must be deposited with the treasurer and held in a separate account under the jurisdiction of the school committee.
That is correct. So any grants or gifts that we have, that's why they come before school committee, they're approved, and we set up separate revolving accounts.
But I guess for scholarships, we've never done that.
Scholarships, we typically have trust accounts. So those are also handled in separate accounts down at the town hall. So this, I think what they were talking about, and if I remember correctly, I think this might have been for scholarships that were given to students for in-house programs, not scholarships that they get at graduation. So for.
Oh, I see. So if somebody wants to go to a conference,
Right.
Yeah, I think that was meant for, it wasn't talking scholarships.
yeah, but those
for
are still
students.
scholarships that are given out at either the honors night or, do you give out any scholarships during the athletic event that you have in school? Okay. So I guess there are scholarships that are given out for within typically the athletic department that
Yeah.
historically were funded by a former booster club.
And I think that was the money that was put in, we had this conversation, I think that was the money that they put in and that they were expending, and that money wasn't gonna be, we felt that account wasn't gonna be,
Solve that whole.
Right.
That account thing, we talked about quite at
Right,
length last year.
right.
So the money, because that was used, my knowledge, like, for example, my basketball tournament held every year, that money goes in scholarships for the male and female athlete, $500 pieces, at honors night. That was going into that account, but then we closed the account. I remember we talked about it with Ted and about where would we put that money to make sure we still had.
Sorry.
That the money that was in that account when it was closed was put into one of the athletic student activities accounts to make sure that it was available. We had a place to put it each year, because the money was raised each year to pay that in the spring, those scholarships for those awards.
and let me just note that, reminder, this audit was for last year's books. So this is ending June 30th, 2017, and if you've looked at the report, the funds are zeroed.
Right, so how, I guess my question would be, for this spring, how are those athletic scholarships being handled?
Good question.
I think they're going into, is it the athletic revolving account? One of our athletic accounts is where we had put it last year after we closed out.
Yeah, I know, and maybe that's in the athletic general account. If you notice at the top, there's a balance in the athletic general that they talked about, and they talked about moving the money from that account in item number 5. They talked about moving that athletic general. It shouldn't be general, it should be a specific program. They talked about actually taking that money and putting it in our athletic revolving account, which we do have on the school side of things.
And again, I don't want to get into a prolonged discussion, but I guess what I would just ask is, I know there have been numerous scholarships funded in the past that were through that former booster club. And if, based on the auditor's comment, I don't know if it's true or not, all scholarships are supposed to come through the school committee. I don't know if that's true or not. But as we get into scholarship season, making sure that those monies obviously are handled based off of what the state guidelines are and then our district policies.
Yep. So we can make sure. I know we've talked about moving the athletic general into the athletic revolving, and if that's the intent for the funds when they were coming over, I know the scholarship fund is zeroed out, so.
Can you
that's-
just, what is the difference between the athletic, general, and the revolving account?
So, student activities account is an account based on a student activity program, so an actual club. And so your class dues,
Right,
your drama club, your diversity club. So these are clubs that have raised money that they can put in that can spend not on your everyday supplies. It can't be used for general supplies. It can't be used for any of that. This is above and beyond the normal educational purpose. A regular revolving account is money that is done by fees or things of programs that go into a town revolving account. So it's a school-approved revolving account through the town that is set of guidelines of what the balance can be, what are the spending requirements for that account? Does it need school committee approval? So you'll see many things, for instance, a school revolving account would be our school rental account. We come to that. We have our school athletic account, which we pay coaches because we take in gate receipts and we take in other things that money goes in there, and then it can pay for game officials. It can pay for some athletic. It can supplement our program. Where this isn't used to supplement, this is in addition to. Does that make sense?
yes. Would it be realistic that $8,000 were received that fiscal year for that purpose in athletics? I mean, because most of the money, I would think, that's raised through gate receipts and even the tournament you mentioned would go into.
Yeah, that doesn't go into here. So this is not gate receipts. So I'm not sure where the money, I haven't looked at the
Okay.
idea. I can't tell you that. I can ask. I can get the research behind it. and find out, certainly, from Ms. Fifield,
Okay.
because they follow the guidelines. They're the ones who deposit the funds. They take in the money, they set it. They actually do all the, processing of invoices and checks. Those things don't come through my office.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? And this obviously does not need approval. This is,
No, this is just an FYI. Just
Okay.
wanted to keep you up to date as to what's going on.
thank you.
And then the other audit that was completed was our end-of-year audit. I presented this last year also. That also went very well. There was only one issue, one recommendation. There was some revenue and expense posted that were not reported on our end-of-year report on the town side. On the city and town, we report school, and we report city and town. And on the information we received from the town, it eliminated some revenue that was brought in by the MSBA for our school building. So if you notice, to go to the last page, that was amended already and updated. So it was a very clean report, and we're really pleased with it. So I'm happy to say things are moving along smoothly, and I look forward to next year's.
Any questions or comments from the committee? And just curious, as an example, line 130, going from 0 to 177,000, where did that money actually come from?
That's a receipt that came in, a payment that came in from the MSBA during that fiscal year.
Right.
And it wasn't put in.
Oh, it just was never posted?
Right,
Okay. Similar to line 2100?
right.
And that was on the town side?
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the Southern Worcester County Educational Collaborative Second Quarter Report. Mrs. Gogan?
This is the SWEC's second quarter report. It's for your information. All superintendents on the board bring this back to their school committee, and it's to keep you apprised of the program, their programming.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, it is a state law that we are required to accept quarterly and annual reports from the collaborative as a member district, so I will entertain a motion as such.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Schoenberg.
I make a motion to approve the Southern Worcester County Educational Collaborative Second Quarter Report as provided.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Laurie, will you poll the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is review, transfer, signing of bills, payroll, and vouchers. Actually, Laurie, could you make sure in the minutes that I abstained from signing the warrant? Because there is a reimbursement for my wife as one of the items. Do you need 3 signatures or a majority of members present? Okay. We'll have to reach out. I can't sign that.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Schoenberg.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion and a second. Laurie, would you pull the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.